Welcome to another episode of Navigating Growth, where we showcase companies that are doing new and unique things. My name is Sal Imami from Better Call Sal, and co-hosting with me is Kevin Hooper from Hanging with Mr. Hooper. These days, enterprise buying teams are more informed and buying processes are getting more complex. So how do you effectively engage your sales team to these types of enterprise buyers? Well, I'm excited to showcase a startup that is doing just that. I'd like to introduce Shankar and Shyam, who are the co-founders of BuyerAssist. Shankar and Shyam, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having us.
Glad to be here.
And so let's start off by telling us, what is BuyerAssist?
So BuyerAssist is a 2.5-year-old startup, and we are building one of the first sales execution platform. So what that means is, enterprise sales, like you said, Sal, at the beginning, is pretty complex, and it's not at all straightforward, right? I mean, we look at sales from a very linear kind of stage 1 to stage 2 to stage 3 kind of model. And the modern buying process, especially over the last few years, has become so complex and convoluted that you cannot do this in silos. So the core idea behind BuyerAssist was to come up with a sales execution platform that helps your selling team and your buying team collaborate effectively, as well as for your primary sellers to collaborate effectively with your internal teams like product and services and other teams that they work with. So we have two products in the market. One, which is called Mutual Success Plans, which is a spin on the Mutual Action Plan, in the sense that typically the Mutual Action Plans focus only on the task items, like the checklist of actions to be done. Whereas we look at this in three different dimensions. The first dimension is alignment on the value and business impact that your service can provide for the customer. Obviously, the second step is the process, the buying process, and exactly alignment. Again, the key component here is the alignment, right? Like aligning with the buyer on how does that company purchase, what are the various steps, what's the order of those steps, right? What are the checkpoints at each of those steps? And then the third component is your people, right? And like, who are the different people who are going to be involved? Again, we've seen statistics saying that anywhere from 6 to 20 people or something like that, right? Like significant jump from the last 5-6 years in terms of number of stakeholders involved, right? So yes, alignment on value, process, and people. So that's a Mutual Success Plan piece. The second product that we have is a relationship app product, which works seamlessly across your accounts and opportunities in Salesforce and other CRMs to help you visualize your buying organization, as well as be able to say who are on your side, who are against you, like who's your champion, who's your detractor, who's most engaged, right? Who are you in touch with, who are you not, right? And also helping multi-threading, making sure that you're speaking to more than one person in each of those things, right? So I think a lot of that, right? So that's a relationship map product.
This is really amazing to me because this is near and dear to my heart in what I've learned as a sales leader over the last 30 odd years of my career, the major changes that have occurred between focusing on the selling process and focusing on the process that the buyer is going to go through and the people. From the perspective of both of you, and we're very lucky today to have the co-founders of your company. Can you tell us a little bit about how you guys came together, what your guys' focus within BuyerAssist are, and what was the motivation for you to put together a company to go out into the marketplace and solve this problem?
No, absolutely. Yeah. Again, a little bit backstory. Shyam and I, know each other for about 20 years now, and we used to go to college together, and we've always thought about starting a company together. And through the years, even after college, we were able to, work in similar jobs and similar companies at some point in the same company. And before starting this company, we spent 6 years in a unicorn startup, and that is where we learned a lot of the ropes around enterprise selling. Met our other co-founder, Amit, who's been an amazing engineering leader through the years. And in that journey, as we were in the front line selling large complex deals, in many cases anywhere between 6 figures to 7 figures, 7-figure deals, we've had first-hand experience around some of the limitations of the current technologies available to enterprise salespeople, both in terms of engaging their team as well as their buying team, as well as what an enterprise sales leader require in order to make sure that all the big deals that their team is managing is on track, and it is it is being built along with the champion or the extended buying team. And that insight that the modern seller has to engage more collaboratively, more transparently with the buyer, and that is at the core of how you do accurate forecasting. That is the core of how you do accurate deal reviews. Became very, very clear. And here we are, 2.5 years later, and living our dream of solving the problem that we experience ourselves firsthand. And yeah, looking forward to adding, creating more and more value to enterprise sales teams that are looking to transform their customer world.
I'm a huge fan of partners, and partnerships are a great way to accelerate growth. What kind of partnerships have you engaged with, and what's worked with those partners and what hasn't?
As you said, right, partners are a broad spectrum. I mean, we always talk about partners who are specifically in terms of technology, OEMs, and all those things, as well as, we speak about distribution partners, right, referral partners or co-selling partners. I think for a startup, and I know the focus of this conversation is a lot to do with the startup piece, right? I think startup, especially the first few years of a startup, is like parenting a kid, right? Like, so to that extent, you need all the help that you can get. Right. I mean, so the reason I bring that up is, I want to kind of highlight the amazing support that we have received from our advisors and well-wishers, which is probably a network of, 10, 20 people that we know each other. I mean, we've known for a while, and genuinely, many of them have no financial incentives or any of that. And some of them do, and even there, like they've gone over and above, in terms of helping us. So I think that support system goes a long way. I know it's not traditional definition of partners, but I think really appreciate it. And since we are on this call, I do want to also, share our extreme gratitude with Kevin for, what he's been an amazing, supporter. Yeah, thank you so much for the time you spend, for all the kind of help you do, Kevin, for us, right? I think really appreciate it. So again, I want to start off because I think at this stage of maturity, I think it comes down to the support system a lot, and also other services. Like, for example, as a founder, we would like to focus on, the core elements of business, right? So say things like building the right product, talking to customers and all that, right? So a lot of our service providers help us with things like hiring, which is a very important component of success and failure at our stage, right? Also with other services. I think when I think of partners at this stage, see, eventually what happens is we insource a lot of these things, especially what these service providers do and all that. As a scaled up company, that is why we look at partnership purely from those other angles we said. So just want to highlight that there's a lot of investors, like obviously you get the drift of that. From a traditional meaning sense, I think in our case, at least, what I can say is we have technologies that we integrate with, but not necessarily deep partnership, because these days a lot of integration gets done over the usual APIs, open API kind of a model, right? But and also from a sales standpoint, right, I think we're not gotten to the point where we have a formal partnership program. But having said that, we definitely do tap into our extended network to accomplish very similar things. Like, we do have a lot of friends and well-wishers who refer leads or kind of help us with co-selling, etc. Eventually, I do feel, again, drawing from historical experience from my previous jobs also, I think eventually we will go into deeper partnerships on both these fronts, right? Both the technology front, where you go, because that becomes important for how you kind of grow in a certain market, right? Like, you want to make sure that you have the right friends and all that. So that, as well as obviously the go-to-market distribution partnerships. So
one of the things that I'm really interested in, because I always believe that hindsight is 20/20. You really can't change the past. You can only focus on what you can change in the future. But let's just postulate for a second. If you could go back 2.5 years with the knowledge of the experience that you've had over the last 2.5 years, the things that you've done, is there one or maybe two things, or maybe nothing, that you would do differently if you had the opportunity to go back in time and get together as three friends that have been on this journey together? What would you do differently or better?
It's a very philosophical question as well as a practical question, right? In terms of what we could do, what we will do differently, right? I think There are a few very foundational things. For example, often when you're a very small company, you look at a large company and worry about what if they do something like this, right? What if we run against a larger player in a neighboring space? And what we've come to realize over the years is that it doesn't really matter what someone else does. What really matters is how well intended are you in solving the problem that the customer faces, and how well you can actually solve it for the customer. Obviously, purely from a sales tactic perspective, we need to figure out ways in which we are better, in which we can solve the customer's problem in a superior way, and also articulate why having a different solution uh, is important. But again, taking a step back, purely from a business perspective, worrying too much about uh, things that we don't control, is something that I wouldn't worry about as much, right? And I would more be heads down, focused on our strategy, our go to market, our product strategy, and obviously how well we can execute the game plan. That is one thing that I think that's been a big learning. Uh, the the other learning is also coming from how how deep do we want to go into some of some of the latest and greatest, right? For example, when you think about how easy it is for us to convert a user of a product to do something different from what they've been doing all these years, we almost always assume that change is difficult. Change is difficult. Again, let's not even debate that. But the best transformation happens when people take the difficult change, and more often than not, you have to always find the balance between, hey, how do I build something that truly solves a problem, but versus how do I build something that keeps the user happy? And more often than not, they may not be always the same. And how do you make sure that if I were to retroactively look back at our journey, we took some time to please the user, to doing things in a certain way. And what we realized is, there's a difference between what technology should do and what enablement should do, right? And we should, you know, I would go back and pay very close attention to, what is this difference and how do we make sure that we are truly driving the value that we intend to drive in our customer organization. So the two things I can think of in terms of, uh, changes if I were to retroactively look at the journey.
Yeah, I mean, I can add a couple of, but I think so great points actually, in terms of the last mile execution and enablement of users and driving change. Also looking internally in terms of how we build the organization and a couple of things, right? So I think number one, I would say that spending a lot more time with customers and users. So especially for us, so we started working on a problem that we have experienced, and obviously there is very deep conviction on that problem from our own experience, right? But finding the right balance in terms of, hey, this is it, or is it like that is one or two of the data points with higher weightage, right? So spending a lot more time early on before we get into the full build mode, and also being very open to, again, that, like you said, Kevin, right, like 2020, right, hindsight. But spending more time with customers and users, I think is something that we'll do more of than what we did, at least in the early phase. The other thing is, at least in our case, the first set of hires that we make are usually on the product engineering side, because obviously got to build something, right? And more often than not, because we are building something for the salespeople, right? Many a times, engineering folks don't necessarily have the right appreciation of this persona, right? I mean, and when I say that appreciation, the word is key, because understanding, yes, people can learn something, but then appreciation, no, right? Because if you've been in sales, you understand the state of mind, you understand the certain requirements and the unique nature of those requirements. I mean, simply put, we had this very nice phrase that we had going in the office just to explain this difference, which is, we said that, hey, a general user would like to manage a tool. Ideally, like they want a tool that they can manage and do all those things. a sales user more often than not likes the tool to manage them. So they just tell me what I should do. Like, what is the thing I should do? It's a subtle thing, but then, so spending a lot more time, coming to your question, like what is that you do differently? I think recognizing this early on and spending a lot of time enabling and empowering the team to understand and appreciate the nuance and be able to then take that understanding and appreciation into what they do, right? Especially when it comes to product engineering is something that I think we would probably, something we learn and, we kind of do better. Yeah, I think at least in addition to some of the other points, right? I think those are at least 3-4 things that I think we can always go back and do better.
First of all, thank you very much for your candor and for your time in sharing your story. So just to summarize here, what we've heard today is a story of seeing a problem that is really a very third decade of the 21st century problem. That your customers are significantly more educated, and so the sales process has changed and become much more about focusing on what the journey the buyer's going through and how to help that buyer to understand the process and the people and the influences that are going to be on them, and then building a tool. We also heard, and this is also something that I find personally very, very interesting, the story of how you came to solve this particular problem. How 3 friends that have known each other since college work together, see a frustrating problem where they are and decide they want to get together and solve that problem and build something out of that. And then lastly, this notion of essentially bringing the village together of a bunch of people to help you. And then if you had to do it all over again, essentially, put that on steroids and more time earlier, if you can, which is not to be critical in any way, shape or form, because the journey is part of everything about where you get to. And then this notion that, and again, this one is near and dear to my heart, that bridge between product and engineering and the people that are actually going to use your product and understanding the nuances. And I love your phrase, salespeople like to be guided. I love that. They like to be told what to do, whether it's a customer telling them what they need to do in order to solve their problem and get to a decision, or whether it's a tool. And if you can encapsulate some of that in that tool, you're going to be successful. Thank you very much for your time, Sal. Once again, thank you for your time. For everybody, this is another episode of Navigating Growth from Sal Imami and Kevin Hooper. Thank you very much.